Are you in the market to buy or sell over-the-road equipment? Do you have tractors or trailers that you'd like to upgrade? Taylor & Martin works with fleets of all sizes, from single-unit owner-operators to large corporate fleets. Working with an auction company that is dedicated to tractors and trailers and only selling them at absolute public auction is the only way to go. Make the conscious decision to work with the best team in the industry, Taylor & Martin Auctioneers.
Welcome to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about telematics, specifically how we can use safety technology and telematics to help operations and, for drivers, try to address that tricky issue, which is turnover. Those of you who aren't familiar in the trucking space, turnover in the long-haul trucking segment specifically is a huge issue. I should know when I managed fleets, I would get a new cadre of drivers, and statistically, after the 6-month mark, only half of them would be around. By the time the year ended up, I think I only had a quarter of my fleet. And so for fleets who are trying to not only bring new drivers in, the steady stream, of course, is needed. It's important to also help get them prepared and not only be safe, but use the up-to-date latest technology. So we're going to be talking with the folks at Nauto. They're a leader in the AI-powered safety and operations space for commercial vehicles. And so without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Dr. Stefan Heck. He has been a regular of the show. It's always a pleasure to have him back on, and it's an awesome opportunity to get to catch up. Welcome, Dr. Heck.
Thanks for having me again.
And I like to talk of the turnover aspect because if you look at data sources, of course, even according to the American Trucking Associations, they are talking about we are needing more drivers. If you look at the massive turnover problem, it does look like we may need to fill the bucket more. And so safety plays a crucial role. First off, let's talk about what Nauto does, and then we're going to dive into the traditional approaches for driver training and onboarding and what that looks like and what we're missing.
Yeah, so Nauto is a real-time safety system. We retrofit it to trucks, but also to other lighter commercial vehicles. And essentially, it's a sensor package that sits on your windshield that monitors what's ahead of you on the road and detects any hazards. They could be other vehicles, could be a pedestrian crossing, can also be a stop sign or a red light or somebody cutting into your lane. And then also looking at where is the driver's attention, and is the driver seeing that hazard, or are they distracted or falling asleep? And then our goal really is to empower the driver to prevent the collision in real time. So we look about 5-6 seconds into the future, predict how this might unfold, and then give the driver either voice coaching or an alert warning in the most urgent cases, so they can brake, swerve, change lanes, whatever it is they need to do. And through that, we're able to eliminate a little over 2/3 of all the collisions in the fleets that we deploy. It all is really quick because the drivers already know how to be great drivers. It's really about surfacing the hidden risks that you might miss, where none of us is perfect. Occasionally, you don't spot something, and the AI and the computer vision can surface that to the driver, warn them about it. And the goal really is to have the collisions never take place. So if we get you home safely at the end of the day, we've done our job and the drivers are happy.
And I like the use of it's like a co-pilot. It's like a helper using the power of computer vision. One of the challenges when we look at the traditional approaches to driver training and onboarding, it feels like half the battle is just telling them, here's your truck, here's your pre-pass, here's your cab cards. By the way, do you have all the stickers and permits? Oh, here you go. You're good. All right, get on the road. Go. And so talk about the regular approach, because it does seem to me like, especially in the realm of fleet safety, usually lately, whenever I started in 14, it felt like it was an afterthought until somebody had, unfortunately, something go wrong.
Yeah. So, different fleets have different levels of safety attention, I would say. Some certainly it's just about the truck and compliance, as you just said. But for other fleets, they're very serious about safety, and they do morning meetings, they do stand-ups, they do training. I think the traditional safety approaches, the big difference are they take a lot more time. You got to go to classes or you got to do coaching. The supervisor needs to look at drivers, do ride-alongs. Takes more time for the driver as well. The second big issue is it's not as individually tailored. You and I are different. Every driver has their own unique skills and capabilities, and also their unique risk factors, right? So just to give you some examples, when we work with large fleets, you see that most drivers have some risk of distraction, right? You touch your phone or you're texting, or you've got a notification from your dispatcher. All of those are distracting. Or sometimes it's just lunch. You're grabbing a drink or your sandwich while you're driving. Those are all pretty hazardous activities, and that's prevalent. Almost all drivers have some level of a distraction. But you take risk factors like tailgating and speeding, now you're only talking about 20% of drivers that really have those kinds of risks. And then you take something like drowsiness, that's even more scarce. Unless you're driving between midnight and 6 a.m., 1 to 2% of drivers experience drowsiness and fatigue. Now, for those drivers, it's a really, really massive risk, right? So if you're fatigued, you should take a break and get off the road. But it's not that common. Most drivers driving during the day aren't going to be fatigued. And so the problem with the traditional approaches is you're kind of doing it for everybody, right? If it's classroom training or app training, you're going to broadcast that to everybody. And really, you should be tailoring it to what are each driver's specific areas of risk and needs. And that's part of what's powerful with the technology is, each driver's alerts and each driver's warnings are customized. And then to the point of how much time it takes, because it's automated while you're driving, there's no extra time, right? You're doing your job. You're driving down the road, delivering cargo, delivering a load, and on the job as you're going, it's surfacing risks for you, and you learn in real time. Because if it says, "Hey, watch out for the red light," okay, you're going to pay attention the next time you get to that place, right? Tailgating is a similar one, right? Everybody's trained on counting seconds to make sure you leave enough falling distance. But actually doing that in the real world and accurately judging distance is not that easy. Our system will help the driver calibrate, what's a safe following distance, what's not. And you can learn that in a day or two without having to spend any time in a classroom. So it's really, you're earning money, you're delivering the load, and you're getting safer all at the same time. So it's a lot more efficient. The result of all that is you don't have to find a good driver. A lot of fleets are trying to hire good drivers as the starting point. Of course, you should hire good drivers when you can, but as you already said, there's a huge shortage, and you're constantly looking for new drivers. If we can take any driver, even one who's just okay, and actually make him a good driver in a week or two, that's a huge advantage. Because then, sure, you can still hire great drivers, but you can also hire drivers that are okay and make them great drivers in a couple of weeks.
I like that point you brought up, especially on the coaching part and the support aspect, because it really does feel kind of crazy how drivers are hired. You look at your MVRs, they put in an application. This is a very it's almost like a factory line of processing in drivers, orientation on the road. But you never really know unless there's a DAC report or if there's accidents on their record, which can fall off after certain periods of time in terms of some fleets are like no accidents in the last year or 2 or 3 years. It does seem like it's like a blind date with the drivers, and without the technology, you don't really have a baseline to help figure out how do I make my fleet better because I've only observed them everything but driving.
Yeah, so our technology allows you to do a test ride, and we can see how safe are you. But the bigger thing is, even if you've hired somebody who's not great yet, they can become great in just a couple days of driving. We see that in the first 72 hours of driving with our technology, drivers actually get to be less than half the risk, typically 60-70% reduction. Many drivers get 90% lower risk. So that's really phenomenal. You're taking an average driver and turning them into a rock star. And by the way, for the drivers, that's great. That's something they can take with them, not only for this job, but for any job, right? And everybody wants to get home safely. Nobody wants to have collisions. Most of the risks the drivers take are what I call unconscious risks, right? You're not deliberately speeding, drag racing. You're a professional driver. You're not going to do crazy things deliberately, but you take risks that you're not aware of. And by bringing those risks to your attention, you can dramatically change driving performance. I'll give a simple example, right? Most of us, if you're honest, you'll admit that occasionally you touch your phone. Right now, you will get people saying, "Oh, I never touch my phone." It's like, I know, I don't believe that. But if you ask people, so tell me, how often do you look at your phone? How long do you look at it? I've done this experiment literally hundreds of times. The drivers that are honest will say, look, I probably look at it once or twice a day and a second or two. Well, it turns out the data shows it is actually once or twice an hour. In some cases, it's 6, 7 times an hour. And people underestimate how long it is as well. The average is actually 3 or 4 seconds. 3 or 4 seconds is quite dangerous. At highway speeds, you've gone a football field without looking at the road. And so, just getting you to really reduce it to maybe once a day, you need to look something up or respond to an urgent text. Ideally, you'd still pull off the road first. We definitely recommend that. But the difference between looking at your phone once a day and looking at your phone 6 times an hour is literally the difference between you're going to have collisions or you're going to get home safely.
And that's such a hard problem to tackle. I remember, especially given the nature of the job, the devices now can either ELDs used to be. I remember the old driver tech units. We had Qualcomm's driver techs back at US Express, and it was an actual box, an IB-cab device. Well, nowadays you can do it on your cell phone, an iPad, a tablet. It can be integrated into the dash. And so it's almost like, in one respect, we've done a great job of helping their workflow through better devices and hardware. But on the other side, we now have to tackle the devil in the details, which is now there's more distraction. My driver manager is messaging me, I'll load details. How do we is the technology the third leg of this stool that's helping us figure out the safety aspect? Because I really, when I'd send messages to my drivers, I'd assume they're stopped at a safe location to answer it, but you never really know before we had the ability of all this telematics and tech.
Yeah, it's absolutely an essential third leg. And as you already alluded to, technology is both on the good and on the bad side of the ledger here, right? It can make you safer, but it can also interrupt you and distract you. This device that we all carry in our pockets now is your number one cause of collisions. We see that almost 70% of collisions are some form of distraction, and the vast majority of that is, handheld phones and tablets. Everything else is a much smaller percentage of risk. And if you're texting and driving, from our data, we can see you are 23 times riskier than a normal driver. And so don't text and drive, whatever you do. That you definitely should be stopped and pulled over. But as you pointed out, it's not always your fault, right? You'll get a message from your dispatcher. You might have an emergency at home. Somebody's trying to reach you. Safest thing is always to pull over. But if you need to glance at your phone, make sure you're just giving that quick glance and you're doing it in a context where it's safe. I always describe, the same behavior, right? Holding your phone up or texting with your phone. It matters what's happening in the context with how risky that is. If you're doing it while stopped at a red light, your risk is really minimal. You slightly increase your chance of getting rear-ended because the guy behind you sees the light turn green and assumes you're going to go. So not zero risk, but very, very, very small risk if you're doing it while stopped at a red light. You do exactly the same thing, looking at your phone, typing a text at 70 miles per hour on the highway. Now you're 23 times riskier. You do exactly the same behavior texting on your phone while there's a pedestrian crossing the street. Now you're 2,700 times riskier. And, a lot of people think, hey, I'm a good driver, a lot of experience. You can't survive odds 1 to 2,700 times against you, right? Nobody can survive, 3,000 to 1 odds against you. It doesn't work. So that's where that contextual training in the moment on the job through the feedback is really important, because if there's a road hazard like that and you're texting, we're going to get you right away and say, hey, don't do that now. Pull over, to the side of the road to use your phone, right? We understand phones are urgent. We know, phones are designed to be addictive, right? The phone companies, phone makers and the app makers want us to spend more time on the phone, but not while you're going 65 miles per hour.
And I'm curious if when we're looking at the corrective action, the closest thing I can think of is, you remember the noises they make when vehicles come in your blind spots? I love the folks at Volvo, but there's some features. They have some really good avoidance, lane departure avoidance and stuff. But I swear I had this one driver, and I'd call him. I don't know if he was very good or not, but I kept hearing this beep, lee, 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 nonstop. Like, when we're looking at ways to correct behavior, is there any science or secret sauce on giving the right feedback and the right context to help folks, instead of being like, oh, this thing's just barking at me, versus, oh, yeah, no, you caught me. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, there is. And it's actually complicated. There's sort of a lot of science to it. 4 key parts. The first one, and you already mentioned it has to be super accurate, right? If I alert you falsely, you're going to lose faith in the system. You're going to start ignoring it. So I have to be super accurate. Our system at Nauto is over 99% accurate. So we're really right nearly all the time. And that's super critical to earn the driver's trust. The second is you have to be timely. If I give you an alert after something's happened, you're going to get frustrated. Like, that wasn't useful, right? So we always look to give you 3-4 seconds of heads up before something bad happens. And the speed with which you're able to assess the risks is really, really important. The third, and really important as well, is I should not alert you for the obvious stuff. So if there's a stop sign coming up, you glanced at the stop sign, you know you're going to need to stop. You don't want an alert for that, right? That's called backseat driving. Nobody wants to be second guessed. So I really need to focus on surfacing those risks that you haven't already seen. That's why our technology is so powerful, because we see where your eyes are and what have you looked at, right? Are you looking at your phone? Are you looking at somebody else in the cab with you? And then is there a hazard outside that you haven't seen? And we pick those moments. And what you see is when you pick those moments, you immediately get initially, a scared reaction because your eyes are back on the road and you go, oh my God. But then after that initial shock and you'd have a chance to evade the hazard or hit the brakes, you get gratitude. And we literally see, we see thumbs up from the driver. We see hand waves. We see head nodding. Occasionally, even though there's nobody in the vehicle with them, the person will say, thank you. And you can just see that reaction. So it's super powerful when you have that positive response, if you get it just right. The last part, and you touched on this as well, is you can't do it too often. Go back to the example of distraction. In a typical fleet, when we first start, 7 times per driving hour. If I intervene 7 times per driving hour, even if I'm right and perfectly accurate, you're going to get really upset, right? That's just a nuisance level of intervention. So how do we manage that? We really use the situation assessment of the whole context to pick your highest risk moments and intervene around those. And then we're very careful not to overload you. Of course, if your system's not accurate, some of the other video telematics systems out there have 25% accuracy. That means 3 out of every 4 alerts are wrong, are false alarms. Then you're going to over alert because you're giving a lot of false alerts. So real magic to it is be relevant, be at the right moment in time, give enough heads up, be accurate when you do it, and do it around risks the driver hasn't already seen. So they go, oh my God, that was risky. Thank you very much.
That's one of the big challenges, especially when you're looking at back office safety and compliance for larger fleets or even just owner operators, is the accuracy has to be there, because sometimes if the telematics aren't accurate enough, you're going to get false violations, false identifications. And then frequently you could spend just as much time having to clear that out before you can get to the real meat and potatoes, which is, oh, this was actually a big event. Talk about one of the big things in terms of the accuracy. How does the telematics work? I know some folks compute it on the edge, I'm told, where you put it all in the box and it processes it. Some people send it over the cell phones to like a giant server neural net, and then it spits it back out. What are the different ways that these folks are processing the data? And then kind of how does Nauto work as well?
Yeah, so there's a third model too, which is it goes to a human being for review, right? It gets shipped to India or someplace else, and they review it manually. So Nauto, everything is done on board. This is our device. All of the detection, all of the risk determination, all happens on board. That's important for 3 reasons. The first is, you want it to operate even if you're in a tunnel or if you're underground somewhere or in a rural area where there's no cell phone coverage. So if you're not doing it on the edge in the vehicle in real time, you've got coverage gaps where you're not protected. Second is, I already mentioned, you need to do it timely, right? We need to give you 3 or 4 seconds before the collision to actually still do something about it. If you're uploading data and then getting a signal back, you're going to be late. And we see that. There's a lot of competitive technologies out there that take 10, 15 seconds to alert the driver. 15 seconds later is too late. It's too late, right? We process everything immediately on this device. And within a fraction of a second, we can give you a warning if it's really an urgent situation. And so that's critical. Last part is, one of the biggest concerns drivers have is about privacy. So if I'm using this to, our device does it all on board in real time, and recording is actually even optional. You don't have to have any record at all. It's really about giving the driver to the notification so they can fix the issue. But in some of these older technologies that are doing video recording, somebody else is watching. That's very privacy intrusive, right? And particularly if it's 3/4 false positives, they're watching a lot of video of what you're doing in the vehicle that it really has no bearing on safety whatsoever. But as you said, it's a huge burden on the supervisor because they got to clear out all this video. But it's also very privacy intrusive for the driver to have somebody watching all the time. So the advantage of Nauto is the AI is on board. It's super accurate. We have policy options where the fleet can either have just the warning to the driver, or what's most common is the driver gets the first warning. And if the driver fixes the risk, that's all. Nothing's ever uploaded, right? So if you're speeding, we give you the just notification to slow down. You slow down, that's it. Event's over, right? No, nothing's uploaded. Your supervisor doesn't see anything. You fix the issue. That's what we want. In the most serious incidents, of course, you get into a collision, then we upload video. And then the last part is, you really, because of the accuracy, and the drivers are getting to be great drivers within just a couple of days, you're basically not uploading anything anymore. So we see that, drivers upload trigger events in the first couple of days, but a week in, you're talking about the once a week that somebody else cuts you off that is now caught on video. So we have some fleets where literally 0.01% of the time is now being recorded. And it's only those moments where really there's a threat to you and you want to have a record of that event. So that's a huge advantage, both on the privacy, but also in terms of the effectiveness of the system, and a lot less overhead time wasted for both the driver, because they don't have to go be coached on anything, and for the supervisor. We're working with a lot of fleets in Latin America now where they have control towers that are watching the vehicles. You don't need any of that, right? Because the accuracy is so high. We've seen some fleets where 98% of all the videos they were looking at were false positives.
Wow.
You can imagine the waste of time that represents. And now, instead of getting hundreds of videos, they're getting the one risk event that actually matters. They can make sure that driver, is either already dealing with that event themselves or getting coaching just on that tailored risk.
I like that setting where it's not attorney-client privilege, but it's ELD driver privilege, because that would be one of my biggest gripes if I was driving was, oh man, you're going to tell my boss. Now I'm going to get in trouble because you're automatically uploading it. So having that ability for customization helps get that driver buy-in as you're trying to get them to trust the device to help them improve their behaviors.
In fact, that's our promise. Your boss will never see anything that you haven't had a chance to see first and correct. No, that's literally, you're in charge, right? You're controlling the truck. So you need to know first. And then if you fix it, that's end of story. There's no risk.
And looking at some of the other tech, you guys have the computer vision as well. Does one of the cool things with telematics, I get to report on folks who do LiDAR, ADAS systems. These OEM trucks are coming off the line with very extensive ones. Is that something where Nauto has the ability to help plug in and utilize some of these IoT devices on the asset as well? Because that's one of the fascinating trends I'm seeing is not only are we seeing the telematics folks kicking up their abilities with these hardware innovations, but also the OEMs are starting to adapt new radar, LiDAR, and camera arrays as like the table stakes now, instead of just like autonomy tests and stuff.
That's right. So we are reading data from those vehicles, from the extra sensors, and we're factoring that into the risk analysis. Where we're headed actually is that you won't have to have this device at all. Our software that's detecting risks, that's giving the drivers warning, will actually get embedded directly into the truck. So we're working with the vehicle manufacturers for the next generation, because you can do a couple things. Then first, as you said, you can take advantage of all these sensors, right? Radar can see even further down the road than the camera can. But you can also give feedback in new ways. It turns out that haptic feedback, shaking your steering wheel or tightening your seatbelt, your body perceives that even slightly faster than an audio cue. So instead of warning you about the pedestrian crossing, I can give you a seat buzz, get your attention back on the road, and give you even more time to respond to it. And then the last part is, some of these newer trucks have automatic emergency braking capability. So in the case where the driver gets the feedback but doesn't respond quickly, you have another backstop to say, I'm actually going to trigger braking. And because we can see whether the driver is doing something in response to the feedback, you can actually brake earlier, which really matters as well. Anybody who's had automatic emergency braking trigger on a truck, it's a pretty scary event, right? It's all out maximum braking, everything goes flying, screeching, tires. And so in that scenario, it's much better if we can intervene earlier, because we're seeing, hey, that driver's fallen asleep. So you need to get the truck to a stop, and you don't have to do a last minute emergency brake. You can actually intervene earlier.
We're going to have you back on to talk about some of the cool integrations when that comes. I spoke with a steering maker they called ZF, and I didn't know that they were like the majority maker of all steerings. And that's what they're talking about was there's an art and science to how to steer your truck because the shaking and stuff when you ride in one. And so having that ability to pair the telematics, have the driver cues, and then also with the braking, that's going to be some really cool tech. So I'm super excited to see it. We got a little bit of time left, so I want to make sure that if folks want to learn more about Nauto, they want to get in touch, and also read some of the studies and stuff. Y'all been working on some cool stuff. What is the best way to get more information?
Best way to get more information is go to our website. It's Nauto, N and then AUTO, Nauto. So nauto.com. On the website, you'll find some videos that will show you exactly what we do. You can see some experience testimonials from other drivers. And there's also a great benchmarking study. I want to give a plug here for Virginia Tech Transportation Institute. They're one of the best academic research institutions on driving risk. They've looked at all of the technologies out there and scored, how accurate is it? How quickly can it detect? So if you're interested in getting more real world data of real tests, that's a great way to learn more about the technology as well.
Perfect. Stefan, thanks so much for hopping on again and talking with us. Super excited to see what y'all are cooking up next. We'll touch base again soon.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on again.
That's going to be a wrap for this episode. But if you're just joining us, we're on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, wherever you can find your podcast needs. While you're at it, go check out the newsletter, Loaded and Rolling. That's freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. While we're at a little bit of housekeeping, check out the F3 Future of Freight Festival. I do have a special F3 promo code. I want to plug it in. It is LRF325. We'll throw it up there on some graphics if it's still good. If not, definitely sign up for the event. We got some cool promotions going on. You don't want to miss it. That's it for this episode. Thank you all so much. I'll see you again next week.